Zaki writes, Corbyn is Obi-Wan Kenobi. Maybe it's time for a Luke Skywalker to take on the Tory empire. # New Hope. There is a touch of the Alec Guinnesses about him. Maybe my filmic analogy a moment ago was a little unfair. If you were casting for a British Prime Minister for a drama, especially a drama you wanted to sell to America, who would you cast? Jeremy Corbyn or David Cameron? I'd say David Cameron. And increasingly politics seems to be a beauty contest. We used to mock the Americans for that, do you remember? I'm not sure we can anymore. But the results, bad for the Tories in the South East, a loss of seats, and they've got problems on the way with the police investigation into allegations of, misbehaviour on their Tory election spending. Allegations of, it's not fraud, is it? It's misspending. That could be very interesting. The police are on that as well. And again, it's something that you can't help thinking Alistair Campbell might have been pushing a little bit more prominently in the run-up to yesterday's ballots. The fact that Channel 4 News have led the field on this, led the line on this. Some brilliant investigations into Tories bussing people into constituencies and not declaring the money spent on them, allegedly. I don't know why Labour didn't make more of that. Maybe that's evidence of the new politics, or maybe they're worried about the spotlight turning on them next. But these are all things that I think constitute evidence of the machine of politics, the game of politics. And all of the Corbyn fans that we've spoken to today, the Jeremy Corbyn supporters, they're good people. They're idealistic. I'd rather deal with idealists than whatever the opposite is of an idealist, although bigotry can exist on both sides. And bigotry is just, of course, a position that you refuse to be shifted from. It's not necessarily a bad or an ugly position, I don't think. I'd have to check the dictionary. It's just a position you refuse to be shifted from. It's the opposite, if you like, of this programme's motto, that there's no point having a mind if you never change it. But it's the game of politics that he doesn't seem able to play. And his supporters, brilliantly represented on this programme in the first hour, his supporters like that about him, don't they? And this is one of the breakthrough points for me in having conversations like this. You like the fact that he doesn't play the game of politics. People, perhaps, of a less idealistic outlook don't think you can win the game if you don't play it. So when they talk about electability, they're talking about the ability to play the game. When he talks about a new politics, it's almost a rejection of the rules of engagement. And I guess where the twain can meet, perhaps where the twain can meet, would be a recognition that the first caller made, or the second caller, that he espouses a message, a position that would be a lot more popular if someone else was espousing it. And maybe that someone else would be someone with the same team sheet, but with different tactics. Does that make sense? Lucy is in Harrow. Lucy, what do you think?
Hi, James. I'm the first-time caller.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about the reason why people hadn't voted. I'm 36. I've just graduated as a social work student. I've never voted before. This is the first time I've actually voted. And the reason for that is because I've never really been informed enough about politics and really understood the impact it has, not only on the field of work I'm about to enter, but also...
I don't know what's happened to your phone, and I apologise to people listening that this happens so often. It's not our fault. What happens is people sound absolutely fine before we put them through to the studio, and then I don't know whether Lucy's fallen down a well or climbed up a ladder or something like that, but can we just try and just make Lucy's signal? I really, really want to hear from a 36-year-old social worker who's never voted before about what's changed, and we will come back to her. In the meantime, I'll just head over to Woodford Green, where Karen is. Karen, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. So with Jeremy Corbyn, I see him very similar to another person that I admire, and that is Arsene Wenger. Funnily enough, he supports Arsenal. Arsene Wenger is a man of principle, and he stood by them no matter what the end result is at the end of the season. And it's very similar to, if you think about Jeremy Corbyn, he's a man of principle. Whatever he said, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20 years ago, he still stands by it.
That doesn't make him a man of principle. That just makes him stubborn.
Yeah, and that's exactly...
Do you still have the same views you had 25 years ago?
Or
has real life intervened in some way and changed them?
I I'm only 33, so but visa I had 10 years ago and 20 years ago. I still hold that.
Yeah, I bet you're 64, but you just saw an opportunity to punch me right in the proverbials then. Do you still have the same views you have 25 years ago? Answer the question. I'm only 23, James. Yeah, all right, carry on. Clever clogs.
But the thing is, with Arsene Wenger, I think with Jeremy Corbyn, he might not get results right now. People will ridicule it, but when it comes together for him, through whichever mean, it will be really beautiful. It will be one of his biggest achievements, just like it was for a man of principle like Arsene Wenger.
Yeah, but Arsene Wenger hasn't won anything for years.
But when
he hasn't won the league for years.
But when he did, it was one of the most beautiful things.
He hadn't been there for very long when he did. It was. I think it's the right analogy for the wrong reasons. Let's go back to Lucy. So what changed, Lucy? What made you vote this time?
I think we got cut off. I am a student social worker, and this time I feel more informed. I think the politics I've been covering at university and understanding the impact it has on the role that I'm going to be entering as a social worker.
Wow.
And just on my life, I've just never really been that informed about politics. And I was having this debate with my dad yesterday, who absolutely loves Jeremy Corbyn, and is a very keen Labour supporter. I kind of got a bit more of a historic view on politics, and I've never been really interested before. And I think actually it's about educating younger people about the importance of politics, as you said earlier, on their life in general. And I just don't think that, whether that would be in education or schools or further education, I think that that's where that information needs to be provided.
Why do you think it isn't?
I'm not sure.
No.
I think it could be too complicated. It could be depending on who delivers it and their political point of view. I know that some of the stuff we've been taught at university, it does depend on who's teaching that,
yes,
as to then what information you're provided, but it's up to you then to research the other side and maybe just to have that more balanced view. But I think to have politics a bit more in schools or further education, to get those younger voters at 18 plus, a lot of people are not interested because they don't really understand it.
And you'd still be in that boat yourself if you hadn't gone into university education?
Absolutely. And I've done a degree before, so this is a postgrad.
But you can help me out, actually. So even when you were doing your undergraduate degree, you didn't feel a political engagement. It was only because social work is it's a very politicised profession, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Rightly or wrongly. Maybe you can help me out then, because what you're saying is incredibly snobbish, except it doesn't sound snobbish coming from you. It sounds snobbish when I do it, which is why I'm so glad you've done it. Because you're saying the reason why a lot of people do what they do is because they're not very well educated.
Yeah, they're just not well informed. And I think that from previously up until now, politics to me was just a bunch of people, in all honesty, telling me a whole bunch of lies that actually I never really believed. And all I saw was things that they were saying that never really happened. So that's what I viewed politics as, and I didn't really understand the process in what they did. And now I feel just better informed to be able to vote and think, well, actually, my vote does count. And now I know that there's challenges once they get into government, but I have more faith in these particular people because I've now feel more informed. So
I think I know the answer to this, but I guess, as with Karen's alleged age of 23 a moment ago, sometimes it's more fun to be taken by surprise. How did you vote? What did you do?
I did vote for Labour.
And you saw that vote as a vote for Jeremy Corbyn?
Yes. And my dad has his own political status.
Of course.
I think from the research and from the manifestos and from the information that my dad gave me yesterday, I agree. I think that he's making a change in politics, making people more interested, and I have just more belief in him.
I'm getting some incredible calls today. I really am, and you're right up there, Lucy. Thank you. It's nice sometimes for me to just shut up and listen, and don't quote that back to me. All right, I've said it now; it's out there. Lucy, thank you. Michelle's in Folkestone. Michelle, what made you pick up the phone?
Just listening along to the conversation. And I've been known before to have a bit of a rant.
I think I'd have rung in today, actually. I think it's one of those days I'd have rung in if I was listening to the callers that we've had. So what do you want to say?
Well, what I like about Jeremy Corbyn and the direction of which he's taking the Labour Party is that it is different to what we know as the political establishment and the elite. he does take his time and he listens. He doesn't just jump the gun and go straight in with spin and rhetoric. He actually stops, listens, and thinks about his response. I like that.
It could still be wrong. We could still stop, listen, think, and then be horribly, horribly wrong.
Yeah, everyone can be wrong.
True.
There's always that possibility everyone could be wrong. Unfortunately, I was back in May of last year when I voted the Tories.
What's made you change your mind? What's made you think you got that wrong?
I was the woman who shouted at Amber Rudd on Question Time last year.
Oh, yeah.
And I was wrong because I had the negative impact of government. And I think a lot of people these days are disengaged. It doesn't speak to them politics because they don't understand it, or it doesn't talk to them, or it's boring.
Yes.
Until you really get hit by the negative consequences of governmental decisions, you don't realise just how important our democracy and our government is. So
I remember now. It was tax credits, wasn't it? It was your tipping point.
Yeah, I mean, it got spun that the tax credits was the whole reason I voted Tory, which it wasn't at all. That's just the way it got spun.
Yes.
The whole reason I voted for Tory was for the EU referendum.
Yes.
Because I believe that this country needs it. It's been screaming for it for 40 years, and thank God we're finally getting it. And whichever way it goes, one way or the other, that's down to the people of this country.
And then, ideally, that the issue can be parked whichever way it goes, and we can crack on with other things and have discussions that are based upon a notion of permanence rather than flux. What was the reason you turned against the Tories, though? Because if it wasn't tax, it was the tax credits. It was that, and it's all months of things. Yeah.
I've watched the Tory party over the last few months asset strip this country. They're lying through their teeth. There's things on their manifesto that they're not actually doing, and there's things that weren't on their manifesto that they are doing, like privatising our entire education system.
That's an interpretation, of course. It's not. I mean, they would deny that that's what they were doing. How are you financially? Because it was
they're running down the NHS to then sell that off. They'll deny that as well. Of course they would. We know this. I mean, I've got a child in an academy school. Thankfully, my oldest child, she is very academic, so she's been able to, she's got through, and hopefully she's about to do her GCSEs, and she's got a conditional place at a grammar school to do her A-levels for. But the problem with academies is there's no accountability with them. You have no one that you can go to when they are doing things that are very wrong, such as, unfortunately, with academy chains, there does seem to be that they go for newly qualified teachers or teachers.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm late for the travel. I don't quite see what Corbyn's done. I can understand. I remember when you shouted at Amber Rowe, you were shouting in a measured manner. You got very upset and you thought she was good for you and you'd change and you were really on your uppers financially. Yeah. What's Corbyn done to persuade you that he'd be a better champion for your cause?
He's listening to the people of this country, who are the ones that vote for the people in power.
Is he really? Is he?
He's maybe not listening. Maybe he doesn't represent everyone.
Well, no one can.
Exactly, but that's the beauty of democracy. It's each to their own, and everyone needs to remember that.
So, in a way, as a Conservative voter at the last general election, you see Jeremy Corbyn as offering you more ear than Ed Miliband did.
I see him as offering this country a chance to be better than it has been at maybe any other point. I don't agree with everything he has to say, but that's once again, that's each to their own. No, not everyone.
So you still see it as an oil tanker that is slowly turning around, and that's a theme that's emerging. If I hadn't already said that, I should just shut up and listen. I think I'd say it again. This is going really well, actually. To be entirely selfish about it, I'm finally hearing some answers to questions about Jeremy Corbyn that are neither tribal nor impenetrable on either side of the debate, whether people are unpersuaded by him or still optimistic about his prospects as the Labour leader. It's really, really interesting to see perhaps him as part of an ongoing process rather than the end of that process, or simply to recognise everything he's doing differently as refreshing. I'm not going to lie to you. I think you put all of these alleged positives up against the Linton Crosbys of this world, the people whose approach to winning elections is a little bit like I can't remember his name, Drago in Rocky III's approach to winning boxing fights. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for subtlety. Then I think you're going to get knocked out. But it's still nice to understand why people would be cheering. I didn't vote for Labour. I voted for the man, Jeremy Corbyn, says Francis in Surrey. I could do perhaps a little bit of the why there as well as the what. But an answer to the question I just asked the producer, which is what happened to our interview with Jeremy Corbyn. He was supposed to be coming in on Wednesday. And it just never happened. They just stopped replying to our emails, apparently. We had a thingy, an interview in the diary. We had it scheduled. And obviously we don't communicate directly with him. We communicate with his people, as it were, his advisors, his closest circle of media advisors, and they just stopped responding. And look, I'm not pretending I'm particularly important or particularly significant. Far from it. It was his opportunity to talk to you that I thought was relevant about that encounter, his opportunity to actually address you. But of course, I guess when politicians come into a studio, I wonder if you can guess which mayoral candidate absolutely refused point blank to come into this. You can probably work it out, can't you? To come into this studio during the course of the election. You worry that you don't get your message across. You just get duffed up by attention-seeking journalists. There's probably some truth in that. John in Crawley takes it further. He says, I believe Jeremy's problem is his desire for non-confrontational dialogue. I received a feed, he writes, from the Daily Mirror in which Conservative Party members had been caught using racist or unpleasant discriminatory remarks 17 times. If Corbyn had simply used this as ammunition to rebuke Cameron at the dispatch box, then this is on Wednesday at PMQs, then he could have shot down the argument instantly and returned to asking more pertinent questions. It's all well and good championing a new kind of politics, but he must use the tools to hand in order to push his aims, which is a really, really charitable way of saying he doesn't like being questioned or held to account. And that is kind of supposed to be the opposite of liberal pluralism, isn't it? Or left-wing politics. He doesn't seem to like being questioned or held to account. And whilst part of his rationale and justification for that is fair, there's too many egotistical journalists around trying to make their name by landing punches and scalping politicians. I completely understand that. And he's right, there's far too many of us doing that. But you kind of can't really play any other game. Can you? It's a bit like saying, I'm not going to play in the Premier League, I'm just going to play Sunday Parks football. But I still think I might win the title. That's how it's looking to me. Barbara's in Kilburn. Barbara, what have you got?
Yeah, hi, James. I think everything you said today actually has been completely bang on the money. I think the problem is once the dust settles on these midterm elections, they're going to realise Labour has made a terrible mistake. This was the moment that they were meant to be leaping into the lead. This is the moment where a party of protest and a party of opposition should have been there opposing everything. And their voice, exactly as you said it, is meh. That's the word, MEH. He hasn't, he's lost, he hasn't won anything. And I think the problem is that everything that he stood for and the people around him stood for was the party of the 80s. That far left, very white, patriarchal, sexist, we want you there, dear, but only ironing the red flag. They have got a problem with anti-Semitism. His own brother put out a thing yesterday, or Piers Corbyn wrote a thing that said basically blaming Israel for ISIS. That's the family that he comes from.
Oh, well, I won't let you have. You can't have that. I mean, that's no more relevant to his politics than David Cameron's sister's politics are relevant to his.
No, but it's the landscape. It's the landscape.
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Do you have any siblings?
Well, I think if you're the...
Do you have any siblings?
Of a party, I think if you're the leader of a party and you're defending people left, right and centre... No, I can see with the route you're going down, but let's talk about Labour, which is...
Well, hang on a minute. I just want to know if you've got any siblings.
What's that? Right, do I feel accountable for what my
No, I'm not interested in what you've got to say. I'm going to phone up your sister and ask her what you think.
I don't. Well, okay, fair enough. So the point is, you're asking the things you want to know.
Yes.
About the future for Labour, and at the moment, unfortunately, the £3-pounders and the people that have come in and used him as a protest. And I think everything you said before, that everything that he stands for should be electable, but it actually isn't, because it's muddied. There are no policies. It's you can't turn around and say I want to jaw with everybody, including my friends in Hamas and Hezbollah, but I'm absolutely not going to sit down with Netanyahu, for example. So they pick and choose what they want to say. You can't have open jaw, but then no platform certain people. They haven't got any policies. They have got a problem with racism, and I think it's inherent in their anti-imperial. It's this far left approach of protest that actually doesn't get the moderates anywhere, and it makes them unelectable. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, and I think you're 100% right.
You're very kind. I don't know that you've actually, while agreeing with me so passionately, I'm not sure you've accurately represented everything that I said, but such is the state of my ego that I'll nod along with the compliment while wondering.
But you know what? I think you've hit the nail on the head when you say this morning, this was the moment that they were meant, you said 9-10 months in at a time.
Yeah, but you know what they would say? They would say, well, people were predicting we were going to lose 200 seats, and that hasn't happened either. That's why I'm not describing it as a disaster. I'm describing it as meh.
Yeah, it is meh. Exactly that. You hit exactly that. It is meh. And the point was, they very cleverly, after he'd come out and said, I'm not going to lose a seat, they then started to spin it the other way and say, oh, it's the, as you know from the trolls, it's a Zio toy.
All of that conspiracy. But he has won by-elections. The Labour Party has won by-elections. He won a landslide leadership election. He has delivered victory.
That is his mandate.
Yeah, but that is his mandate, and he should probably earn the right. He probably has earned the right to fight at least one general election. I owe everybody quite a serious apology. Ofcom are all over us during election periods, and I've got a horrible feeling I may have just dropped my second enormous clangor, professionally speaking. Drago was, of course, Rocky's opponent in Rocky 4, not, as I said, in Rocky 3. In Rocky 3, it was Clubber Lang. Yeah, so, crikey, do you think we're going to be all right on that? God, I knew this was going to happen. Should have been paying more attention. It's coming up to 11:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we continue to canvass the views of the nation in a way that, well, to be honest, is proving surprisingly fruitful. And you recognise what I mean by that, because you're saying, I'm glad you're giving callers time to help you warm to Jeremy Corbyn. I am not warming to Jeremy Corbyn. I'm coming to a better understanding of the people who are already warm, and that's really useful, okay? Gordon Brown lost 350 councillors in 2008, so Jeremy Corbyn is not the first Labour leader to fail to increase the number of councillors in his first election, although I guess if you were looking for comparisons with previous leaders and you were Jeremy Corbyn, you probably wouldn't want Gordon Brown to be the most obvious comparison for people to make. And Reece adds that that's Reece, who was on earlier from Cumbria, he's busy this morning. The media strategy is disastrous. You are not going to convince people to vote for you if the only media you trust is the Morning Star, and that is a little bit how it looks to me. Jack is in Guildford in Surrey to take us back to Corbyn. Jack, what would you like to say?
I was thinking really how the way Corbyn was voted into the leadership of the Labour Party, which is basically on block votes, emails, and all the rest of it.
Yes.
The people he's surrounded himself with, who are, there's nothing wrong with having ideology and dogma, but I mean, when it's unwavering, then you have a problem in a world which is wavering like mad.
It's funny that, isn't it? Because a U-turn is seen as weakness, and yet equally, an absolute inability ever to turn should be perceived as weakness as well. You don't think we still live in a post-Thatcherite society where U-turning is a negative?
I think. Well, I think if a U-turn is an honest turn,
yes, rather than forced upon you,
then it should be looked on as a big plus. But I mean, I remember the speech that Hilary Benn made on the bombing of Daesh, and his statesman-like speech in Parliament, and the one person I looked at, and the body language, was that of Jeremy Corbyn. Now, people keep saying that, Livingston and the Labour Party and all the rest of it are anti-Semites. Semite in the dictionary includes Arabs and Jews. The Labour Party, or the hard left, or whatever you want to call them, are pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist. But I mean, I saw Corbyn's body language when Hilary Benn made that classic speech, which I thought was one of the most statesmanlike speeches I've heard in Parliament in years. And I just thought to myself, you, mate, have got 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you're not using them in the right proportion.
Would you historically have any sympathies to the Labour Party? I mean, are you looking at them with a sense of wistfulness and disappointment, or do you always look at them slightly askance?
I don't like the Eton mess. I don't like hard left. I don't think that getting rid of the nuclear option is, in this day and age, with the likes of Putin and money grabbing people like that, or land grabbing people like that. That's not the time to start getting rid of your major deterrent that has stopped all wars since the Second World War, in effect.
I know, and that does seem, when you ask people what they hang their hat on, Trident is fairly high up the list, and I suspect you're right, Jack, that outside that echo chamber that has created Corbynism, whatever that may be, outside that echo chamber, Trident either isn't an issue at all, or is an issue where you kind of think, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We ain't had a nuclear war, so chances are our policies with regard to nuclear weapons are working.
War since nuclear, since the nuclear arsenals were built up. So, I mean, I suppose that's got to be a plus, isn't it?
What about then, because you've clearly given these issues quite a lot of thought, what about the suggestion that he is merely a part of a process, a reinvention of the Labour Party, a redrawing of, if you like, Blairite lines, and it's foolish to expect Jeremy Corbyn to build Rome in a day, or indeed to become Rome in a day?
I think you need to look at human nature. Human nature is based on greed. Socialism isn't. And it goes completely against human nature. And when you've got somebody like Corbyn, who was a knee-jerk reaction to the Eton mess,
I like the pun. You don't have to keep throwing it in there.
It's what it is. It's silver spoons looking after silver spoons, isn't it?
Well, except that they've probably patted themselves on the back at least as much as anybody else have after last night's results. They've done better than you would expect them to do at this point in an administration that you've described in such negative terms.
But I mean, if you were going to elect a viable opposition to David Cameron and the boys, then Dave's mob, then forget the mess. Dave's mob. Right? If you're going to, why do it by email? I'm sure half the people who voted were bloody Tories.
That was the claim at the time. I don't think the evidence backed it up, and you know that the party membership, if it was infiltrated in any way during the run-up to that election, they won't still be hanging around now causing interference. Jack, thank you. 11:41 is the time. 03456060973. By way of balance, Emma writes, where your caller Jack heard Ben's statementship, I heard his warmongering and jockeying for personal political power. But of course, I'm just an extremist who didn't want civilians bombed in my name again. Well, the refugee camp bombed yesterday. Arguably, if more potent action had been taken against Assad, whose regime stands accused of that atrocity, that wouldn't have happened. So it's possibly not black and white. Val's in Islington. Val, what do you think?
Hi.
Hello, Val.
Hi, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome. What's on your mind?
Well, what's on my mind, James, is I want you to start liking Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn is an awesome statesman. He is an Englishman.
True.
Who has got...
I'm still with you.
Yes, I'm glad you're with me. He's an Englishman that, he's got such a peace.
What?
He's more about peace.
Peace.
And I think if you met him, you would like him.
He was supposed to be here on what day was it? Caroline, Tuesday or Wednesday? He was supposed to be here.
Remember, he
Tuesday and Wednesday. Tuesday and Wednesday. He was supposed to be here on Tuesday, so we can't do Tuesday. He'll come in on Wednesday. He's still waiting. Where are you? Where is he?
Okay, well, I'm sure he will turn up, but you've got to start being a bit positive. How are you going to, just be a bit positive with him? Jeremy is doing a great job, and let me tell you something. The unspoken voices, like the young people, they're the ones who are wanting Jeremy to succeed.
They didn't turn up yesterday. Yeah. They didn't go and vote. Their turnout was so low because all the young people stayed in bed.
Young people are they're starting to rise. They're starting to take notice of politics because of what's going on. And I don't understand why is not everyone, because I believe it's only the people that we're hearing on the media that seems to be against Jeremy. But
this isn't the media, this is the voters. This is why I'm only talking to you today. I'm not talking to any politicians, pundits, professionals. This is voters, and we're hearing a lot of negativity towards Corbyn. It's not just the media.
No, it's not all negative towards Corbyn. You're just listening to the negative ones. You need to know that there are lots and lots of positive people out there. Jeremy is an amazing person. He's the opposite, definitely, to Cameron. He wants the good. I tell you, he will be Prime Minister of this country, and he just wants the good for the people, and all people, not just a select few, but all people. So I'm saying, James, I will even
Val?
to Jeremy, come and sit with James.
Do you know him then? Do you know him then, or are you just going to go and stalk him and knock on his door?
No. I know Jeremy, and he's always doing good for all. It doesn't matter who you are. He has a very good heart, and that's what this country needs right now. Okay, so yeah, you just start turning around and.
I'm only going. All I can ever do, Val, is be sincere and honest. That's all. I'm never going to lie to you. I'm never going to fib. I'm never going to change my position to make myself more popular. Say again?
No, okay, from your perspective. Remember, we all talk from our own perspective.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, when I listen to you sometimes, I'm like, wow, what's going on with James? He sounds such an intelligent man, yet he's coming out with things that doesn't sound intelligent.
What?
I'm sorry, but...
Not like maths. I'm very bad at maths.
Well, I'm not so good at maths myself, but what I'm saying is...
But you've only really, Val, we're not going to fall out because you sound lovely.
No, we're not.
And all I've really heard, I wish there was a less potent word than platitudes, because all you've really told me is that he's lovely and peaceful.
Okay.
And you're about one step away from telling me how cuddly he is. This is not what politics is made of.
No. But you've got to know that the man, he stands for his principle. He's for years he's fought against Trident. He's not coming and straight away switched. So he's a principle man. He's also, very much about...
But there's not a voter on the planet who's going to go, do you know what, I'm a lifelong Tory, but I think I'm going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn because Trident.
No, forget about Trident. We keep using Trident as the main thing.
You started it.
I know, I had to say it because of what you just said, but what I'm saying is about a man that sticks to his principles. And also what needs to happen is he needs to have some better people around him. And that's
really true. He could do with you, actually. You should be doing his PR. At least I'd get a crack at him.
Trust me. Okay, just look out for that name.
You have a word with him, Val. Seriously, tell him. I'm not making any promises, but I'd like to ask him quite a lot of questions that at the moment his supporters are having to answer on his behalf. But hey, look, I'm trying to guard against that thing where you go, oh, they won't talk to me, oh, cowards. Boris is going now, so we'll leave that. I think in his case, according to the Evening Standard, it was an insistence on the part of his aides that he never exposed himself to proper scrutiny on this programme. But moving forward, I'm sure all politicians are more than happy to be questioned in front of to my mind, the most intelligent and politically gauged audience in British media. Except for this fella. I can't answer this question, really. He goes, don't you just hate it when you join James's show halfway through a topic and realise that you've missed an absolute cracker? How can I possibly know what that feels like? What would happen? If you did an election every day, or some massive political story every day, when you can rip up your normal sort of approach to the programme and just talk about the broader issues in quite an unfocused way. That's the best way of covering the largest amount of ground. How long would it be before we got bored? And we said, can we go back to the days when we just do a topic every hour and you ask a nice simple question at the beginning and then bore us rigid with your 10-minute introduction and before the real fun starts and everyone else gets to join in. I don't know. I love days like this, but I think it's partly because they are the exception that proves the rule. They are the alternative. And I'm going to have words with the Facebook department after the programme, because almost before it had come out of my mouth, that line about the Tories having 99 problems, but Jeremy Corbyn not being one of them, and the look on my youthful producer's face, which was almost identical to how my 10-year-old looks when I start dancing at weddings. And now they've only gone and punted it all over the internet. Danny's in Coventry. Back to Corbyn. Danny, what's going on?
Yeah, I just want to talk about how the media have shaped the political debate so much that socialism is actually seen as some kind of negative extremist policy.
Yeah.
And it's not, like you said earlier, it's not getting a fair crack of the whip. And in my personal opinion, I don't think whoever runs the Labour Party, if they go in on a socialism platform, they'll never get a fair crack of the whip. And the problem with the public is they see elections, well, majority do, once every 5 years, voting once every 5 years. And all they hear is like snippets and highlights and headlines. And if they just do that, they'll see Corbyn as some kind of evil person who shouldn't be anywhere near power. And people don't look past the headlines and do their own research and critically think about things. So,
yeah, but Danny, I don't know how often you listen to the show, but I mean, that's pretty close to what I feel about the media and what I feel about voters. But I have to tell you, as I look at America, we need to find a new song, Danny, because you can't just sit there saying all of these angry people who don't think about things and aren't very bright or well educated. that's why the world isn't how I think it should be. You don't change anything by espousing that position, even if it is true, even if the research does show, even if it is a wonderful way of presenting a radio show when people come on with these sort of positions, and you only have to ask them one question before their whole position collapses like a cheap suit. They don't go away thinking, oh, maybe socialism is the answer. They go away thinking, I bloody hate that James O'Brien and his blooming facts. So how do you do that? How can you cite lack of information, lack of insight, lack of education, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding when you're describing the people who you need to win over?
I think more live debates, to be honest. Hear it from the horse's mouth.
I'm not going to a live debate. There's a match on, you know. I've got better things to do.
No, not with you. I mean with politicians.
No, I don't mean me. I'm putting myself in the role of the punter. I don't want to go to a live debate. I know what I like and I like what I know. I want someone to stand up and tell me that all problems in my life are the fault of Polish people, and then I can sleep better in my bed because I don't have to blame myself.
This is the problem.
Yeah, so how are you going to solve it? I'm not arguing with your analysis of the problem.
I don't know the answer.
Well, get off the blooming phone then.
I just see how it is. I mean, you had just before the election, the council election, all it was on about was like the anti-Semitism row, which was negative. Let's be honest.
Yes.
But the Tories.
But the media didn't do that, Danny. The media responded to the story. The thing is, this is why people like you frustrate me slightly, and I mean that in the nicest possible way. I truly do, because you're right to talk about the media having an agenda, and you're right to talk about the very notion of socialism being toxified as part of that agenda. But what the hell do you expect people who own newspapers to do? Start calling for collective ownership, dedicating their own fortunes to a political movement that would see them vastly diminished? There's no earthly way you're ever going to have a commercially viable media operation that spends the majority of its time calling for increased public ownership and a better redistribution of wealth, because that would be extremely rich turkeys voting for Christmas. So when you get a story like the anti-Semitism story last week, part of it is politics, but most of it is bums on seats. It sells more papers. It brings in more passionate responses. Ken Livingstone is the reason that the Labour Party has a problem with anti-Semitism this week, not the Daily Mail or Rupert Murdoch or LBC.
But like, it isn't a more important story.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, does it? If I was selling tickets for the fun fair, I'd be shifting shed loads for the ghost train and naffle for the speak your weight machine. People like stuff that is invigorating, energising. They like to be made frightened and angry. Even if you're getting angry and frightened with the right-wing politics because you're better than that, or you're getting angry and frightened about whatever target the right-wing politics is telling you to hate today. And the media, of course, is going to reflect all of that. It's why the BBC's so important, because they're not allowed to go down that road, but everybody else is going to.
But of course, if the Tories cheat in elections, and it could cause the re-election of 25 key Tory seats, which then doesn't give them a majority, surely that's a monumental story. A huge.
What is again? Sorry, what's a monumental story?
Apparently the Tories have overspent and broke election rules.
It is a big story, and it is getting the coverage that it deserves, but it's not as big as... Look, the Tories overspent, allegedly, in 20-odd constituencies, and it may turn out that this is really deeply sick. Do you see what I mean? It's not up there with saying Labour are anti-Semitic.
Well, I think...
You're selling me an accountancy story versus race hate.
Race hate is more important to the public.
No.
Well, that's what you just said that.
No, it should be more important to the public, but if you're trying to sell tickets to watch an audit of the Conservative Party's election expenses, or one of the most prominent Labour politicians in the country get a public kicking live on your television, who do you think you're going to sell more tickets for? The Ken Livingstone crucifixion, or the accountants auditing the Conservative Party's election expenses?
Well, I think...
Answer the question. Who are you going to sell more tickets for?
Well, you haven't given my story a fair crack of the whip. You haven't explained it fully, because if they're found guilty, then them seats go up for re-election. We have a new government.
I know the story, and I understand its importance, and of course it's massive, but it's ifs and buts, and if ifs and buts were pots and pans, there'd be no need of tinkers. If you are asking me as a journalist why that doesn't get the prominence that the Ken Livingstone story gets, the answer is threefold. Number one, it's only at the allegation stage, and it's unproven. Number two, I think part of the reason why the other parties haven't been kicking up such a fuss about it may well be that they're worried what's going to happen when the spotlight turns on them in a similar way. And number three, it's just not sexy unless you already hate the Tories.
If you can see that, why are you such an anti-Corbyn like person? if you can see how the media works, why are you so against him?
Because he's never going to win. And I'm not against him, mate. I'm not against Jeremy Corbyn. I look forward to the day when I can interview him. I'm against the sense that what he is bringing to the table at the moment is going to deliver any form of electoral success in the foreseeable future.
That means all we're left with is a neoliberal free market regime, whether that's Blairite Labour or Conservative. And that's it, forever.
That is the tragedy of putting all your hopes in the Corbyn pot at the moment, is that a genuine, winnable, electable alternative to what you've just described edges ever further out of sight, ever further out of reach.
Yeah.
Because you're going to church, effectively, when you talk about Jeremy Corbyn, and I'm going to the polling station.
I just think he's more anti-corruption and
Well, he might be, but you're at church at the moment. You're on your knees saying prayers. And that has never, ever, ever translated into votes.
So I don't really understand that analogy.
No, nor do I, but it sounded pretty good while it lasted. It's 11:59. What I mean is that you're speaking from a position of faith, Danny, rather than a position of fact. So everything you said is admirable and quite probably true, but the hope you have that Corbyn represents an alternative to that is not built upon fact or provable policy or track record. It's built upon hope and faith, which is why I say you're praying. You go to the polls, you look at what happened yesterday, and your prayers are not being answered. The best you could say is, well, I was praying that it wouldn't be a disaster. That prayer got answered. Praying for a triumph, that prayer didn't get answered. Praying for meaningful success, that prayer didn't get answered. Praying for an increase in the number of seats held across the country, that prayer didn't get answered. Praying for some light to shine upon sections of the population unpersuaded by Jeremy Corbyn, that prayer didn't get answered either. I don't normally... Predictive text is something that comes to all of our aid and opposite on occasion. I don't normally point it out, Mike, but you're being quite rude, so I'm going to point out, I presume it's predictive text that's caused this to happen. Every time you media types try and rubbish Corbyn, it makes me more resolute in boring for him instead of rabid self-publicists like Boris. I presume that boring was meant to say voting, but you really should check before you press send, although I guess you've got accuracy on your side.